The night air was sharp, gravel biting beneath Emily's bare feet as she ran, her breath tearing the silence into jagged fragments of fear. She whispered to herself, "Keep going, don't stop," though her lungs burned with fire. Behind her, shadows stretched long across the broken path, the crunch of another set of feet pressing closer, deliberate, unhurried. She glanced back and saw Thomas the enforcer, watching like a predator, his voice cold as he said, "Obedience was your salvation, Emily." A locked wooden door slammed shut in the distance, sealing away what little hope she thought she had. Emily's heart pounded so violently she could hear it echo in her skull, the rhythm of panic louder than her screams. "You'll never escape truth," Thomas said, his tone dripping with certainty. Her hands clawed at the trees for balance, bark shredding her palms until blood slicked her grip. Every sound was a threat. The crack of a branch, the whisper of wind, the imagined chorus of chanting voices rising from the compound she fled. In her ears, Sarah's words haunted her. "They will hunt you, even in dreams." Emily stumbled, gravel tearing her skin, but her eyes fixed on the black horizon where freedom promised silence. Somewhere inside, she prayed, "Let me forget, let me vanish." Emily's body shook as she pressed herself against the trees, praying the night would cloak her. "They won't stop," she whispered, clutching her bleeding hands against her chest. She remembered Rachel's voice in the compound saying, "The world beyond is poison." Those words clung to her like shackles even now. She felt her mind fracturing between hope and despair, torn by the thought of her sister Sarah still inside. "I should go back," Emily thought, guilt cutting deeper than gravel wounds. But Sarah's eyes in her memory were cold, her lips repeating doctrine like stone. Emily forced herself forward, knowing hesitation meant capture. The wind carried the faint echo of chants, each syllable like a hook in her skin. Thomas's voice haunted her memory, commanding obedience, shaping fear into prayer. She clenched her teeth, whispering, "Not anymore." A branch snapped somewhere too close, sending her heart into her throat. She pressed lower, blending with shadows, every nerve screaming that eyes were upon her. She was both prey and ghost, moving silently, desperate for the darkness to cradle her one more step further. The memory of chants still rattled in Emily's skull, layered voices that had once comforted her but now sounded like chains. She had joined seeking love, and for years believed the promises painted by Jonathan, the leader. "You are chosen, Emily," he once said, his eyes burning with false divinity. The words had felt holy, but now they were poison. She realized how long she had bowed her head, how many nights she whispered prayers that were never hers. The forest silence mocked her loyalty, reminding her obedience had cost her identity. She thought of Sarah again, remembering her sister's betrayal when she whispered to Thomas, "Emily doubts." That betrayal had sealed her punishment. Her knees weakened as the truth pressed down heavier than gravel. Emily clenched her jaw, forcing her body upright, whispering to herself, "They will not own me anymore." The night no longer felt infinite. It felt like her one fragile chance. Emily's legs trembled as she stumbled deeper into the forest, branches clawing at her skin. She heard whispers, not from her memory this time, but carried on the wind. The chants grew louder as if the cult had spilled beyond the walls, hunting with their voices. "Obedience is life," they called in unison. Emily pressed her hands over her ears, shaking her head violently, whispering, "No, no, it's not real." But fear twisted reality into something indistinguishable from nightmare. She imagined Thomas's heavy boots closing in, Sarah's cold stare, Jonathan's voice pronouncing judgment. She fell forward, face striking dirt, and for a moment, silence. Her breath slowed, the earth cradling her like a coffin. She wanted to stay down, but something inside clawed against surrender, whispering, "One more breath, one more step." She pushed herself up again, body screaming against survival's demand. The forest opened suddenly into a clearing, and Emily froze. The silence here was too heavy, too staged. A single lantern flickered in the center, casting long, trembling shadows. She felt exposed, as though unseen eyes circled her. "It's a trap," she thought, body tensing. She remembered how Jonathan used such illusions to test obedience, luring followers into staged trials of loyalty. Her chest tightened as she whispered, "This isn't freedom. This is another cage." She thought of Sarah again, her sister's gentle hand once holding hers, now remembered as the hand that pointed her out. Rage broke through fear, her teeth gritting as she spat, "You will not have me." The lantern sputtered, smoke curling into the night as though mocking her defiance. Every nerve screamed that Thomas would emerge from the shadows at any moment. Yet Emily stood taller, trembling but unbroken, the first flicker of rebellion igniting behind her eyes. Emily's chest heaved as she stumbled into another patch of trees, but her mind was no longer in the forest. It was back inside the compound, in the pale light of dawn, when Jonathan stood before the crowd and declared, "You were nothing before me." She remembered how the words seemed to wash over her like holy fire, even as her stomach twisted. The crowd had cheered, Sarah's face glowing with pride, while Emily forced herself to smile. She remembered the day she first entered, broken from a life of loneliness, clutching for meaning like a drowning soul for air. The compound had promised family, a place where her scars would vanish. Rachel had taken her hand, whispering, "Here you are seen." That warmth still haunted her, the sweetness of belonging that made the chains harder to recognize. Emily gasped in the present, gripping her torn gown as if it could hold her together. "I only wanted love," she whispered to the dark, tears blurring her sight. The forest mocked her with silence, but her heart replayed the chants, reminding her how devotion disguised itself as comfort, how obedience became the price of being touched by hope. The memory shifted, dragging Emily back to her first night inside the compound. She saw the flickering lanterns, the rows of wooden benches, the eager eyes fixed on Jonathan. His voice was warm yet sharp as he said, "You are reborn when you surrender." At 18, Sarah had leaned forward, lips parting with reverence, while Emily, still uncertain, whispered, "Maybe this is home." Jonathan's gaze had landed on her, piercing, demanding, his smile both tender and threatening. That moment had shackled her. She feared losing the fragile sense of belonging she had tasted. Rachel had squeezed her hand tightly, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Don't resist, it only hurts more." Emily had nodded, her voice breaking as she whispered back, "I just want to be safe." Now in the forest, she realized the words were the first bars of her cage. Her breath quickened, her heart lurching with grief as she whispered aloud, "I traded myself for the illusion of family." The night seemed to echo her confession, trees leaning closer as if to judge. Emily pressed against a tree, forcing herself to breathe as her mind clawed at the fragments of her past. She saw the nights when punishments were cloaked as purification, when Jonathan declared, "Disobedience burns the soul." She had watched Thomas drag broken followers to the center, while the crowd chanted prayers that felt more like curses. Emily remembered her own trembling knees as Rachel whispered, "Stay silent, don't draw attention." Fear kept her still, fear kept her obedient. Even Sarah had turned to her once, eyes glistening with doctrine, and whispered, "It's for your salvation." Emily's throat tightened at the memory, her voice breaking as she said to the empty forest, "It was never salvation, it was control." The realization felt like a knife turning in her gut, sharper because she had allowed it for so long. The silence around her was heavier than the chants, pressing into her skin. Yet beneath the terror, a small ember of anger flickered, whispering that her longing for love had been weaponized. Her legs trembled, but Emily forced herself deeper into the forest as memories rained harder. She remembered nights of whispered promises, when Jonathan smiled and said, "Obedience binds us as one family." His eyes lingered too long, making her skin crawl even as she bowed her head. Sarah's voice had echoed beside her, "We belong here, Emily." Rachel's touch had been soft, comforting in moments when loneliness crushed her, yet the comfort was always a leash. Emily's lips trembled as she whispered to the night, "I belong to nothing but chains." The weight of betrayal gnawed at her chest, her sister's loyalty cutting deeper than Thomas's cruelty. She stumbled forward whispering, "Why wasn't love enough?" Her voice cracked, carried away by wind that seemed to mock her pain. Each tree felt like a witness to her confession, each shadow a ghost of her past obedience. The silence was heavier than the doctrine, and in it, Emily heard her own voice for the first time, trembling but free of command. Emily stopped, clutching her chest as memories swelled into one unbearable truth. She had wanted love so desperately that she accepted captivity as family. She saw Jonathan's smile, Sarah's proud gaze, Rachel's trembling hand, all layered with chains, invisible yet unbreakable. She whispered to herself, "I was never free inside those walls." Her tears blurred the forest, her voice breaking louder now, as though confessing to unseen witnesses. "I stayed because I was afraid of being nothing." Her words fractured the silence, echoing back with raw finality. She pressed her bleeding palms against her face, breathing shallow, realizing that the cult had stolen her identity long before she ever ran. She was not escaping just the compound. She was escaping the ghost of obedience inside herself. With a trembling breath, Emily whispered, "No more chains." For the first time, the words did not feel like rebellion. They felt like truth. Emily pressed her back against the cold trunk, gasping, but her mind dragged her to the rituals where Jonathan's voice filled the hall like thunder. "Every breath is his gift," he declared, as candles flickered against the stone walls. The congregation repeated every word, their voices rising in unison, until it felt like the sound would crush her ribs. Sarah's face glowed with devotion, her lips moving with perfect rhythm, while Emily's voice trembled, afraid to falter. She remembered how Thomas's eyes swept the crowd, catching every whisper, every pause, and how silence meant punishment. Once, when Emily hesitated, Sarah's hand had gripped hers hard enough to bruise, whispering, "Don't betray us." That grip had hurt worse than the chance, because it was her sister's faith turned into a weapon. In the forest now, Emily shuddered, the echo of those voices making her heart pound, as though she still knelt on the stone floor. She whispered to herself, their prayers were chains, not blessings. The trees swayed in the night breeze, but she still felt trapped, still felt the suffocation of ritual that taught her obedience was survival. The memory of punishments clawed at Emily's mind, sharp and unrelenting. She remembered the night a young boy cried during prayers, his voice cracking with exhaustion. Jonathan's tone was calm but merciless as he said, "Weakness is sin." Thomas dragged the boy to the center, the child's sobs echoing as everyone lowered their eyes. Emily had felt her nails digging into her palms as the boy's cries turned into silence under Thomas's hand. Sarah's whisper had pierced Emily's guilt. "It's for his soul." Even Rachel had turned away, her shoulders trembling, but no one dared to speak. Emily remembered the crushing guilt of watching and staying still, of surviving by silence. Now in the forest her breath hitched as she whispered, "We became their jailers." Tears streaked down her face, shame heavier than fear. She had wanted family, but obedience had made her complicit in cruelty. She pressed her forehead against the tree, sobbing, "Why didn't I fight for him?" The forest gave no answer, only the wind carrying the imagined echo of the boy's final sobs. Emily's body shook as she walked deeper into the dark, but her mind kept replaying the suffocating rules. Every day had been dictated: when to rise, when to kneel, when to eat, when to pray. Jonathan had said, "Routine cleanses doubt." Sarah had smiled at the words as though they were truth, but Emily felt the weight of suffocation. She remembered the silence at meals, the way every bite had to be taken in unison, the way eyes that strayed brought suspicion. Rachel had whispered once, "Even thoughts are dangerous." Emily had felt her individuality stripped away piece by piece until she feared her own reflection. In the forest now, she whispered fiercely, "I was never theirs, I was me." But the anger in her voice was met with the suffocating memory of rows of bowed heads, each one identical, each one silenced. Emily's chest tightened as she remembered how rebellion was crushed, not only with punishment, but with isolation. "Better silence than betrayal," Thomas had once growled, and Emily had obeyed, terrified of disappearing. The forest branches clawed at Emily's arms as she stumbled, her mind dragging her back to the punishments she could never forget. Once, she had dared to hesitate during a chant, her lips frozen as Jonathan's eyes burned into her. Later that night, Thomas had dragged her to the courtyard, the congregation gathered to witness. Sarah's face was pale but firm as she said, "Obedience must be proven." Rachel's tears had streamed silently, but she dared not move. Jonathan's voice cut like a blade as he declared, "Pain teaches truth." Emily remembered the whip tearing into her skin, the chanting voices rising in rhythm with every strike. She had screamed until her voice broke, her body trembling, her will chained. Now in the forest, her knees buckled at the memory, the phantom pain burning across her back. She pressed her palms against the earth, sobbing, "They broke me to bind me." But even in the memory's torment, she felt a spark of defiance, a voice inside whispering, "And still you ran." Emily collapsed against a rock, shaking as the weight of her memories pressed down harder than the night. She whispered to herself, obedience was survival, but it was death too. She remembered how each day was a cage of rituals, how Sarah whispered doctrine, as though it was love, how Jonathan's smile disguised control. Thomas's shadow haunted her, the threat of punishment always near, while Rachel's silence was a wound of its own. Emily clenched her fists, whispering, "I lived as their puppet." Tears streaked her cheeks, but beneath the grief, anger began to rise. She felt the forest holding its breath, as though waiting for her confession. She shouted into the night, "I was not born to kneel." The words shook her, but they felt like fire, burning away the last remnants of submission. The forest echoed her defiance, silence following like an ally. Her voice trembled but grew steadier as she whispered, "They can break my body, but not my soul." For the first time, she felt stronger than the chains that had bound her. Emily stumbled through the forest, her body shaking, when a memory struck so sharp it froze her. She remembered Jonathan's words whispered to Sarah one night, when he thought Emily asleep. "Your loyalty makes you strong," he said, his hand resting on her shoulder too long, his voice dripping with something more than faith. Emily's breath caught in the present, her heart pounding as she realized what she had ignored for years. Jonathan did not want their souls, he wanted their devotion as possession. She remembered Sarah's eyes, filled with pride at his praise, her voice whispering, "He sees me, Emily." The truth sank like ice. Sarah was not just a believer, she was bound to him by a loyalty born of manipulation and flattery. Emily pressed her hands to her face, whispering, "He stole her too." The forest swirled with shadows as she gasped, trembling with rage at the revelation. She realized escape meant more than her freedom. It meant leaving Sarah behind, claimed by a man who pretended to be divine but reeked of greed and control. Emily's knees buckled as another memory surfaced, one she had buried too deep. She remembered Rachel trembling, her eyes darting as she slipped a scrap of paper into Emily's hand. On it, a single word, "Leave." Rachel's whisper had followed, "They will not stop until you are gone." Emily had stared at her, stunned, as Rachel's face crumbled with fear, and Jonathan's voice thundered in the hall beyond. Now in the forest, Emily pressed the memory to her chest, realizing Rachel had seen the truth long before. But Rachel had not escaped. She had stayed, bound by chains of fear. Emily whispered into the night, "You tried to save me and I failed you." The guilt was sharp as a blade, cutting her as deeply as her wounds. She felt the forest press tighter, her chest heaving with grief as she realized Rachel's silence was not weakness. It was sacrifice. The revelation burned inside her, a twisted gift of love, hidden under years of terror. Emily's steps slowed as the night pressed heavier, her breath ragged as another betrayal clawed through her memory. She saw Sarah standing before Jonathan, her voice steady as she whispered, "Emily doubts the prayers." Emily had felt the floor drop beneath her then, the realization that her sister's love had been devoured by devotion. Jonathan's smile had been sharp as a knife as he said, "Then she must be tested." The words had sealed Emily's punishment, lashes tearing her body, her spirit splintering. Now in the forest, Emily clutched her arms around herself, shaking with rage and grief. She whispered, "You gave me away, Sarah." Tears streamed down her face, the betrayal deeper than any wound Thomas had inflicted. The memory shattered her hope of saving Sarah, for she realized her sister was gone, consumed by the fire of obedience. The truth was cruel. Her family was not her family anymore. Only shadows wore their faces now. The forest seemed to hold its breath as Emily remembered the night of revelation, when Jonathan's mask had finally cracked. She had seen him in the storage room, counting stacks of money hidden beneath cloth, gold trinkets gleaming in lantern light. His lips had curled as he muttered, "They give everything, and I take all." Emily had frozen in the doorway, her belief crumbling as she realized there was no divine mission, only greed. She had stumbled away before he could notice, her heart shattering as years of obedience collapsed into dust. Now in the forest, her body trembled as she whispered, "It was never holy." Her tears fell freely, rage burning hotter than fear. The revelation struck like lightning, destroying the last illusions. Jonathan was not a savior, not a prophet, only a man who devoured lives to feed his hunger. The truth was unbearable, yet it gave her strength, because lies had no power once revealed. Emily fell to her knees in the clearing, the revelations crushing her like stone. Her sister's betrayal, Rachel's silent sacrifice, Jonathan's greed, each truth twisting like a knife. She pressed her bloody hands into the earth, whispering, "Everything I loved was stolen." Yet as the tears streamed, something else rose in her chest. Rage burned hotter than grief, defiance hotter than fear. She whispered louder, "You will not own me anymore." Her voice echoed in the night, trembling but unbroken, and for the first time she felt the chains crack. The betrayal no longer made her weak, it made her see clearly. She had been bound by obedience, fooled by love, but now she had nothing left to lose. The forest was silent, but in that silence Emily felt stronger. She stood, her knees trembling, her breath ragged, and whispered, "You may have stolen my sister, but you will not steal me." The night seemed to listen, carrying her words as a promise. Emily's body was trembling, yet her spirit burned with defiance as she pressed forward into the clearing. The forest had carried her pain, but now it carried her resolve. Then a sound froze her, heavy footsteps, deliberate, closing in. From the shadows, Thomas emerged, his eyes cold and unblinking. His voice cut through the silence like steel. "Running is rebellion." Emily's heart pounded, but her feet rooted to the ground, unwilling to bow again. She whispered, "I will not kneel." His hand tightened around the whip at his side, the faint leather crack slicing through the night air. For a moment, fear clawed her throat, but rage kept her upright. "You cannot break me," Emily said, her voice trembling yet alive. Thomas tilted his head, expression unreadable, before stepping closer. The world shrank to the space between them, silence heavy with threat. Emily's body shook, but inside her chest a fire roared louder than the chains of obedience. Tonight would not end with her broken, it would end with her choosing. The silence shattered as Thomas stepped forward, his boots grinding gravel, his shadows stretching long in the pale light. Emily's breath came fast, but she held her ground. He raised the whip and said, "You are nothing without obedience." The words echoed the countless punishments she had endured, but now they rang hollow. She shouted back, "I am more than your chains." Her voice cracked, but her rage carried it strong. Thomas's eyes narrowed, his face tightening with anger at her defiance. He lashed the whip, the crack echoing like thunder, striking the earth inches from her feet. Emily flinched but did not move back. She whispered, "Not anymore." The moment burned between them, predator and prey blurred by her refusal to break. The forest seemed to lean closer, listening, waiting. Her body shook, but she felt herself rising higher than fear. She thought of Rachel's whisper, Sarah's betrayal, Jonathan's lies. Her past had broken her, but now it lit her fire. Emily's scream ripped from her throat as she lunged forward, not away but toward Thomas. The act startled him, his whip pausing mid-air. She grabbed a branch from the ground, splintered but sharp, and raised it between them. "You will not cage me again," she cried, her voice shaking with fury. Thomas's expression flickered with surprise, then hardened as he moved to strike. The whip lashed, grazing her arm, tearing fabric and flesh, but Emily did not fall. Pain surged through her body, but her feet held. She swung the branch wildly, desperation fueling her strength. For a heartbeat, predator and prey exchanged roles, his confidence cracked by her sudden resistance. Blood dripped down her arm, but she clenched the branch tighter, whispering through her teeth, "I would rather die free." The night seemed to roar with her words, her defiance louder than the strike of leather. Her eyes locked on Thomas, unbroken, unwilling to surrender. The battle stretched in seconds that felt eternal. Thomas lunged, striking again, the whip curling through the air, but Emily darted sideways, the branch scraping across his shoulder. His snarl broke the night's silence, his rage boiling over. "You are nothing," he roared. But Emily's voice cut back, raw and trembling. "Then nothing is freer than me." Her words shook with truth, with the power of survival. Pain radiated through her body, blood dripping, but every step she took felt like rebellion incarnate. She staggered but swung again, the branch clashing against his arm. He faltered, his footing slipping against the gravel. For the first time, Thomas looked less like an untouchable enforcer and more like a man cornered by defiance. Emily's chest heaved, her body on fire with exhaustion, but her spirit surged brighter than fear. "You will not take me back," she whispered, voice breaking but unyielding. The forest echoed with their clash, shadows trembling under the force of survival. Emily's chest burned, her limbs shaking, but in that fire she felt alive. Thomas's whip hung slack in his hand, his breath ragged, his eyes narrowed in disbelief. She raised the branch one final time, her voice breaking as she screamed, "I am not yours." The words tore into the night like a blade. Thomas stepped back, his expression unreadable, the predator stripped of power by her refusal. He growled, "You cannot survive alone." Emily's chest heaved as she whispered, "Then I will die free." Silence followed, heavier than the fight itself. Thomas lowered his whip, his eyes lingering with something close to doubt. Emily's body shook, her knees nearly collapsing, but she stood tall. In that moment, the chains of obedience shattered. Her freedom was not the forest, not the night, not the horizon. It was the fire burning in her voice, unbroken, unclaimed. She turned her face toward the trees, whispering, "I am mine." Emily staggered deeper into the forest, her body broken, but her spirit alive. Each breath was agony, yet every step away from Thomas was victory. She pressed her bloodied arm against her chest, whispering, "I am still here." The night was silent now, the echo of the fight fading, replaced by the sound of her trembling breaths. Yet her mind would not release her past. She saw Sarah's face, eyes bright with devotion, lips whispering betrayal. She saw Jonathan's smile over stolen riches, his voice declaring Liza's salvation. She saw Rachel's trembling hand offering her escape long ago. The memories pressed like weights, threatening to drag her back into despair. Emily dropped to her knees sobbing, "I left pieces of myself behind." Her tears fell onto the soil, mixing with blood, a reminder that freedom had a cost. The cult's shadow stretched long, and even as the night opened before her, she knew it had marked her forever. Emily leaned against a fallen tree, her body trembling, her mind replaying the faces she could not save. Rachel's eyes haunted her most, wide with silent courage, the night she slipped the paper into her palm. "You tried," Emily whispered, clutching her chest. Guilt gnawed her with every breath, the thought that Rachel was still trapped in the compound. Her voice cracked as she whispered louder, "I should have taken you with me." The forest swallowed her grief, offering no comfort. Her heart twisted with the truth that freedom meant leaving others behind, and it was a truth that burned hotter than the whip ever had. She realized survival was not triumph. It was mourning. Every step she took away from the compound was lined with ghosts, each one whispering her name. She pressed her face into her hands, sobbing until her body shook, then lifted her eyes to the horizon. "I will not forget," she whispered. The forest thinned, and Emily caught sight of stars scattered across the sky. The vastness above mocked her years of confinement. Endless space against endless rules. She whispered, "I lived in cages while the sky was always here." The realization broke something in her, but it also gave her strength. She remembered Jonathan's words, "You belong only within these walls." Now, staring at the infinite sky, she realized how small his power truly was. Yet even as awe filled her chest, grief followed. She whispered, "But Sarah will never see this." The truth stabbed deeper than her wounds. Her sister's loyalty was a prison stronger than walls. Emily closed her eyes, tears spilling, whispering to the stars, "Forgive me for leaving her." The sky gave no answer, only silence that felt infinite. But that silence felt like freedom too, raw and terrifying. She breathed deeply, clutching the pain and the wonder together. Emily's steps grew slower as exhaustion claimed her body, but her mind swirled with the scars she carried. She felt the phantom sting of lashes, the echo of chants, the weight of Sarah's hand crushing hers in obedience. She whispered, "They branded me inside." Even now she heard Jonathan's voice in her head, his words circling like poison. "Without me, you are nothing." Her fists clenched, trembling, and she cried out into the forest, "I am something." The sound startled the silence, echoing off the trees. Her voice cracked, but for once it belonged only to her. She pressed her palms to the ground, feeling the earth cool beneath her skin. The cult had taken her years, stolen her identity, shattered her family, but it had not destroyed her soul. She whispered fiercely, "I am mine." The forest held her words like a vow, shadows bending as if to guard them. As dawn broke, the forest shifted from shadows to pale light. Emily's body was frail, her gown in tatters, her skin marked with blood and dirt. Yet her eyes burned with something unbreakable. She whispered, "I made it." The rising sun felt heavy on her skin, too bright, too honest, but it was hers. She thought of Sarah again, her voice echoing in memory, "We belong to him." Emily's throat tightened as she whispered, "I belong only to myself." Her tears glistened in the light, both grief and defiance woven together. Freedom was not peace, it was survival, raw and scarred. The cult would live inside her dreams, in echoes of chants and shadows of fear, but they would no longer command her steps. She lifted her face toward the horizon, whispering, "I will keep walking." The light stretched across her broken body, painting her scars in gold. For the first time she felt the weight of survival and the fragile breath of freedom. Emily walked into the dawn, her gown torn, her skin raw. The sunlight felt heavy, burning against wounds carved deep. She whispered, "This is freedom," though the words shook. Behind her, the forest loomed like a memory that refused to release her. Sarah's face lingered in her mind, lips whispering betrayal, while Rachel's trembling hands haunted her. Survival had meant leaving them behind, and the guilt twisted sharper than her wounds. The world stretched wide before her, yet she felt small, as if her identity had been stripped bare. She pressed her hands together, whispering, "I am alive, but I am not whole." Her shadow stretched long across the dirt path, chains invisible yet unending. At a shallow stream, Emily fell to her knees, staring at her reflection. Hollow eyes, tangled hair, streaks of blood and dirt. She whispered, "Who am I now?" The ripples blurred her face into something unrecognizable. She plunged her hands into the water, watching red wash away, but scars remained. Sarah's words echoed, "You belong only to him." Rachel's whisper followed, "Run." Emily's tears spilled into the current. She whispered, "I belong only to me." Fragile but real. The forest was gone, but its shadow lived inside her reflection. Emily rose, staggering toward the horizon where a village shimmered faintly. Her chest tightened with both fear and hope. Jonathan's words echoed, "The outside will never take you." She whispered, I will not return. Each step felt like defiance, yet doubt pressed heavy. Would they believe her? Or see only madness in her scars? She whispered louder, I am scarred but not theirs. Her knees shook, but her will carried her forward. She stopped at the edge of a field, breath shallow, heart pounding like she was still hunted. In her ears, chants still pulsed, low and steady, as though etched into her bones. She whispered, they will never leave me. Her hands trembled, but her lips pressed into a fragile smile. I escaped, she whispered, but I will always be marked. Her tears glistened in sunlight, and for the first time, she claimed them as her own. Emily stepped into the light, but the chants followed, soft and relentless. She whispered, I still hear them. Silence fell sharp as a knife. Sarah's betrayal, Rachel's courage, Jonathan's lies, all etched into her soul. She whispered, I will keep walking. The vow was not peace but survival. Escape did not erase the cult. It lived inside her. Yet every step forward was hers, scarred but unbroken.